Hi, everyone. Just give me a few more minutes for other people to come in, and I'm also doing double duty and trying to help Kathy get back into the WebEx. Hi, everyone. We'll get started in 1 minute. I'm just working on some technical issues. Okay. Hey, Kathy, can you just confirm that that worked? Are you here? I heard you. Okay, great. Okay, we're going to get started. Thank you, everyone, for joining the final UPSFF Working Group meeting. My name is Ryan Arori from OSSI, and today is December 17th. It is 3 p.m. This meeting is being recorded. We are going to start with roll call. And let me pull up my list. Michael Bayek from DC Public School Board.
I am here.
Great. I am getting feedback from someone. Okay. Vanessa Carlo Miranda.
I'm here.
Great. Alonzo, I'm going to mute you because I think it's your computer.
Okay.
Ken Sherry from Friendship Public Charter School.
Present.
Chelsea Coffin from DC Policy Center.
I'm here.
Jen Comey from the Deputy Mayor for Education's Office. I see Jen on the list. I don't hear you.
Oh, sorry about that. Here.
Great. Thanks, Jen. Justin Ellis from KIPP DC Public Charter School.
I'm here.
Great. Jeanette Fernandez from the Office of Budget and Performance Management.
I am here.
Great. Let's see, who do we have from DCPS?
Hey, it's Jessica Swanson,
Hey,
and
Jessica.
I see Elba Garcia is also here.
Perfect. Okay.
Yes,
Great.
I am here.
Great. I'm gonna skip the other names from DCPS. Shannon Hodge from the DC Charter School Alliance.
I'm here.
Great. Kubila Huddleston from DC Fiscal Policy Institute.
I'm here.
Great. Shelley Hughes from EdOps.
I'm here.
I don't see Mary Levy on the list. She's not here. Jack McCarthy from Apple Tree Public Charter School.
I'm here.
Great. Alonzo Montalvo from the Office of the Chief Financial Officer. I know you're here, Alonzo. Kathy Riley from DC Shape.
I'm here.
Great. Raymond Whedon from Thurgood Marshall Academy Public Charter School. And finally, Jonathan Weinstein from Capital City Public Charter School.
I'm here. Thanks.
Great. All right. So just a couple notes before we get started. Kevin is unable to attend today's meeting again. He's still out, so I will be facilitating the conversation. I'm doing double duty, managing the WebEx platform and facilitating. So if I miss any chats, just kindly raise your voice and let me know if I'm missing anything. We, of course, have Lindsay from the DME who's helping to present the presentation. So thank you, Lindsay. The meeting is being recorded and it will be available for viewing on the working group website. Just a reminder to everyone, please try to keep your cameras on and keep yourselves muted. For anyone that is attending from the public, there will be a public comment period towards the end of the meeting where you can provide your public comment. And for anyone that's using the chat, just please make sure that when you're sending a chat that it goes to everyone so that everyone can see it. So today's agenda, this is the final meeting of the working group. The goal for today is to finalize the recommendations that will be included in the working group report. So what we're going to do, and we sent out the slides that we're going to share today. We sent those out in advance so that everyone had a chance to review them. And we are going to start with the foundation level recommendation because I think that's the one that needs the most work. So I'm setting a time limit of at most 30 minutes to discuss the foundation level recommendation, just so that we do have time to spend on the other recommendations. Just a few points in general. We took there was a lot of feedback that we got from you guys via the survey and just via the meeting that we had 2 weeks ago. So we tried to incorporate as much of that as we could. So the major thing that we did was we streamlined the recommendations to make it very clear what the recommendations are from the working group. And we took a similar structure to the working group report from 2 years ago, where we have the recommendation very clearly in bold, and then following that is a few sentences just for additional context. We tried to capture as much of your feedback as possible. When there wasn't any clear consensus on the recommendation, we tried to explain the different points. And we do know that there is still a little bit of work, but we tried to get to as near a final recommendation for each of these as we could. So before we jump into the foundation level recommendation, are there any questions or comments? Great. So let's, Lindsay, if
yes,
you can go straight
I actually
to
had
the
one.
foundation level recommendation. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Jack, go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question, Ryan. I wanted to get in from the conversation we had in our last meeting. I wanted to ask about the ordering of the recommendations. With the recommendation regarding the foundation, I wondered whether the sense of the group was that we could make that recommendation one and then reorder the other recommendations accordingly, given that it seemed to me that there was a strong sense overall in support of getting the foundation level to what had been recommended in the adequacy study, and just sort of my sense of how reports like this get received. It would seem to me that if we made recommendation 6 recommendation 1 and then reordered the others, that might reflect the sense of priority that I thought I heard in the last meeting that the group might feel. I wonder what others think about that.
Well, this is Kathy, as a person that actually, I feel like we spent the majority of our time on the first 2 recommendations. And as a priority, I feel those have priority. And we didn't attach money to them yet, but we just talked about the foundation at the last meeting, and it's a large ask. So I've been on this committee a lot of times. It's hard that we get to the end and there's always an ask at the end after we spent the majority of our time trying to really drill down on these other ones. So I am in favor of keeping the priority of the way that we actually weighted our time with them. And we don't have any amounts attached to the other ones. So I'm kind of hoping that we're going to get to that.
So other people can provide their feedback on Jack's question too. I think there's a couple of reasons why we put the at-risk definition, the at-risk recommendation before the foundation level. And I think that part of it is that we did spend more time talking about the at-risk student needs over the course of the meetings. The discussion about at-risk student need was also a recommendation that was included in the report 2 years ago. And that's why we spent a lot of time talking about at-risk, in addition to the other things like EL. And the sense that I got from the working group was that we wanted to put the recommendations first that focused more on the students that like needed it most based on the academic performance data and everything that we reviewed. That was my sense, and that's why we kept the foundation level lower. I'll open it up to anybody else that has feedback on that.
If I could offer my perspective, I think we didn't spend a lot of time talking about the foundation level because it's been an outstanding request for several years now. I think it's still at the top. It was at the top of my list all along, but it wasn't a task because it's already been set as a request level. And if we were to, so I think weighing it based on the amount of time we spent discussing it isn't the best way to gauge where it belongs on our list. I think it's been an ask for several years. It still is, and it's still the priority, I think, for at least the charter sector at this point. If others disagree, please let me know. But I wouldn't weigh it based on how much time we spent talking about something that's been an outstanding request that hasn't been acted on for several years.
I just want to echo what Jonathan just said. I think I understand the tension, and it's compelling to me. I think at the end of the day, in terms of what matters to us, how we want to, we have a lot of work to do. The foundation, is the point of departure. And so that I have to agree with what Jonathan said.
Yeah, I'll weigh in as well. My concern would be that if we come up on some tough economic years and they're looking at these recommendations, and then can kind of say, okay, well, there's not a lot of focus on increasing the foundation level. So if we just increase these weights for certain students, then that might, make it okay among the education sector, but that would not be what's best for at-risk students or EL students if the foundation level doesn't increase and the weights just increase, then we still don't have the funding to do the things that we need to do for those students. That's why I just think that the foundation recommendation is so important to be in there, so that it's clearly, like, I think we're all assuming that that's really important, that the foundation level continue to increase, but I think we actually need to state that as an early recommendation to make sure that that it's clear to anyone else who's reading that report.
Can I just add another perspective? I think it is an issue of not just time. I think it's an issue of a focus that was dovetailing off of the last UPSFF Working Group in 2018, that at-risk and L students hadn't received the focus that they deserved. And therefore, there was a study that was conducted, and then the focus of this working group was to start with those. So for me, it is I actually think it was the priority of this group coming forward. I understand what you guys were saying of the impact of dollars, but to me, it is the focus of this group on a set of students, particularly L, that hadn't received focus in the past. So I just want to throw that perspective out there as well.
Could we look at the amount of money? Like, how much money are we? I felt the big thing was we really wanted to target the money to those in most need. Like, we raised the foundation, it will give more money to those students, like it always does, but it doesn't give enough. And part of what we were trying to accomplish here is that we really targeted the money in some ways, best to our ability, to those that had been the most neglected. And, you know, by increasing everybody's pot of money, it doesn't necessarily increase it enough for those students. So there's no amounts here about what they would get, but I wouldn't underestimate that if we actually made that and asked for those students, and those students are going to take a big hit after the pandemic. So I don't think, I realize I'm in a minority here, but I feel it's really important that we don't just add to the large coffer. And, you know, we didn't raise it 4%, but every year we have raised the UPSFF. So it's not that it's been ignored. It's not as much as we like, but I would like to see the amounts that we're talking about and what difference it would make for the ELL and the at-risk students. Those are our most challenged students.
I agree, Kathy. I think the question I'm having right now as we're having this discussion, as I'm listening, is we seem to be framing it in an either or framework. And I don't think anybody in this group is saying either or. I think we all feel strongly that there has to be something done for EL students and for at-risk students, as much as we believe it also needs to happen at the foundation level. So I don't want us to get ourselves in the sort of trap of an either or proposition. I think we got to find the words to make it just as strongly that it's actually, if we're talking about what schools need and what students need, we need all of it. And I know we want to be careful about not coming across tone deaf to the budget realities. I do believe, however, that EL students and at-risk students will suffer if schools don't get something in their foundational level. I think some other members of this working group made that point, and I couldn't agree more. This goes back to the tension of like wanting to attach some kind of how you use the funds that we've said is not best practice. If at the end of the day, I don't get sufficient money for me to be able to do the basics of running a school, then yes, our most vulnerable students tend to lose on that. So I think we need to be in our language, and we need to be equally make the case for all of those categories. We shouldn't be talking about it as to which one has priority over others.
So Vanessa, what you're recommending is that we put language in here that says that the sort of like that the recommendations are not in any specific order, but that the working group, I'm trying to come up with the language on the spot. Each recommendation like has an equal weighting or something like that.
Yeah, we don't want to pin, gen ed students from EL students from at-risk students. I don't see the value in doing that in this report. I think it really needs to be talked about from the perspective about in this current environment that we're living in, we have serious challenges for all of our students. Especially, we acknowledge that historically we have not looked at at-risk and EL. But at the end of the day, we're saying these three critical things is what we need in order for us to be successful and meet the mission of education in the District of Columbia. So I think we have to somehow put it in context where we acknowledge that historically we have not done right by certain groups, and that we are currently in a certain environment where all students are suffering, and we need to make sure that we're not sort of making trade-offs here.
Could I just ask, what is the money? Like, we have 4% as and a money amount in the foundation. Like, so if you raise the foundation, how much have we raised it for the at-risk and the ELL, and how much more then are we requesting to raise it? I just don't have a sense of the dollars that we're asking for exactly. And by raising the foundation, we have raised it some for the ELL and at-risk, but each year we don't raise it enough. So how much more then do we need to raise it? And this not either or, but if they don't do all three, then I think we have to map out the consequences in some way. Like if they're not, they will, if they raise the UPSFF by 2% or 3%, how much more do they need to raise the at-risk and the ELL for us to reach the targets that would actually make a difference for those students?
I think you're asking a really good question, Kathy. From my perspective, and this is my first year on this working group, so I defer to the institutional knowledge of others who have been on this before me. But if I put myself in the shoes of a council member or someone who's actually going to make decisions on this, and if we have funded studies in the past to try to offer recommendations to solving some of the issues, it would seem to me that our report should be in alignment, unless we radically disagree with things like the adequacy study, that we should be arguing for the recommendations that have been made beforehand. If we don't prioritize that, but we prioritize these other areas without being successful in getting what has been recommended for the foundation level accomplished first, I don't know what persuades us to think we're going to be any more successful in those others. And we don't have the power or the authority to determine the amounts. All we have the power and authority to do is to make recommendations. And to me, anytime I've gotten recommendations, and I think most people who get recommendations look at them in terms of, priority, what's the first one that's on the list. So that's my thinking with regard to this. I believe that all of these are important. And I also agree with Vanessa that it is hard for us to be in a position to make this into a zero-sum argument. And I'm not really sure that's what we're doing. I don't feel we're doing that. I just see this as really attending, trying to provide some additional impetus to getting us to where we should be so that we can build on that to get to where we want to be.
I just wanted to make a comment about some of these things. First, this is a working group on the entire formula. The UPSFF is a formula in which the foundation level is just a component of it. The current foundation level is $11,310, and if we raised it by 4%, that would be $11,762 rounded. And if we applied that for this year, because Kathy, it sounded like you wanted a sense of the magnitude, that would be $39 million more in DCPS and $31 million in additional in charter schools for a cumulative increase of $70 million to the District of Columbia. So I just wanted to put that context out there.
I guess the other question too is, what is the weight with regards to the recommendations that we're talking about, like students with 2 or more? Are we recommending like or?
I'm sorry, Kubila, can you start over? There was a lot of feedback.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to, because right now the conversation is like, how much more money
Hey, Alonzo, I'm sorry. I got to keep muting you because there's a lot of feedback when you unmute yourself. Can you just wait for Kubila to say her point and then you can jump in? Sorry, can you start again?
Yeah, just again, because we're talking about how much more money are we looking at? And I guess one question I'm wondering is specifically for the at-risk recommendation we kind of have landed on is like for 2 or more at-risk characteristics. Like, are we recommending a weight associated with that, an amount? Like, I guess because I'm just not understanding what amount of money we're really looking at or discussing here. Because like we could take this 4% increase, multiply it by, you know, what's recommended in the adequacy study and get one amount per at-risk student. We cannot raise it by 4%. You know, we could like do all that sort of different math. I'm just trying to understand for the specific recommendation that we have about the 2+ more characteristics, how are we saying we want to add more money?
So the study that was done had a number that came out to, I think it was like a 10% increase in the weight. But the recommendation itself doesn't have any dollar amount attached to it. So.
And I know I've missed a few meetings, but was that intentional or?
I don't think it was intentional. I just think that it was the working group's recommendation to include a weight for 2+ characteristics, but there wasn't a specific dollar amount attached to it.
I think if you don't, yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Kathy, just I think the focus was on the structure of the weights and whether a new weight would be added. And right, the study itself did some hypothetical 10%, but didn't recommend. It wasn't like the adequacy study where we tried to figure out the actual cost. It helped with the structuring or the adding to target to those types of students.
And sorry, Alonzo, do you want to make your point? I just want to make sure that, just make sure you unmute yourself first, Alonzo.
Following the numbers conversation, it's correct that the 4% recommendation to the foundation will increase to 11,762. But if the weight of the risk students are left at what it is now, 0.2256, that would only increase $101 per student. So if the emphasis is to target these 2 populations, I think that we should keep pushing like Kathy is recommending, that the weight be the driving force for increasing the funding on these 2 populations rather than the foundation. The foundation, if left the weights the way they are not going to produce lots of dollars for these populations. I think the target should be just to be specifically and go after the increasing of the at-risk students. Now, the other point that I'm making, and that is something that we know, a lot of people know about this, steadily the District of Columbia has always managed to increase the foundation, and the best way is to actually do recommend the increase of the foundation. But I'm kind of based on if you make a recommendation, say for instance, we want the foundation to be $12,000 per child. And then people in District of Columbia are going to say, well, we have a study group that recommended $12,000. We are not going to increase this anymore. This is what the study group did. So the increase of the foundation has been very flexible and has increased substantially, not enough in reality, but not enough in the needs of the schools, but in reality has increased steadily. My idea is to put this thing, that the numbers indicates that we should target the weights, make it stronger, because right now the at-risk students are getting $2,552 per student, and the ELL are getting $5,542. If we want more dollars increase there on the basis of what we know that is needed at these two levels, then the best way is to go to the, also make an emphasis to go to the weight. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Alonzo. So the original question here was if we should change the order of the recommendations. I think it's very clear for everyone in the working group that it's not an either or in terms of the recommendations. The working group wants all of the recommendations to be included in all of those changes to be made. So everyone wants a foundation level increase, but everyone also wants to put more money into at-risk. So the original question on the table was, should we change the order of the recommendations? And some people said yes, some people said no. But I think we should just put this to a vote just to settle it once and for all, because I really want to get us to the actual language of what is going to be in the recommendations, which we've sort of gotten to. But I want to just close this out with a vote. So I was keeping track of who was saying what. And there was 4 people that it seemed like wanted to move the foundation level recommendation up higher above the at-risk, and there was 3 people that said that the at-risk one should be the highest. Does anybody else want to put in a vote for what they prefer?
Yeah, I'd like to vote for prioritizing the foundation level as well.
Okay, thanks, Justin.
So will I at DCPS.
I vote for the same. Kim Chariot Friendship.
Okay.
Shannon Hodge for the same.
Raymond Whedon, same.
Okay. So I think that's settled then, that we're going to move the foundation level to the first recommendation, move that up in the order. I still think that we will add in additional language that says that the working group wants all of the recommendations, and you know, that they prioritize all of the recommendations happening based on Vanessa's comment from earlier.
So I just want to add to that, Ryan. This is Jen. I don't disagree with that. And this has been brought up before, so I just want to state it briefly. And I also just want to make sure that it is not tone deaf, that we are asking for everything in a situation, in a time, an economic time where we know that is not possible. So while hypothetically we would like everything, you know, we don't want to make the hard decision maybe of where the priority will be. But so I'm not comfortable saying that I want everything, because I just don't think it's possible. But I recognize that they are all important, and I agree.
Okay.
Ryan, I just want to reiterate this point from our last conversation, in that I think it's important to lift the foundation level for everyone, but that is not by itself going to if we really are interested in closing gaps, we will have to make sure that we are dedicating more resources to students who are at risk. And so that, you know, I know our language will say that it's not an either or, but just conceptually also want to keep reiterating that point.
Okay.
To Alonzo's point, I mean, he's kind of saying if you raise the weight within at risk and within ELL, then you would be, when you raise the foundation level, they will get more. But if we keep the weight the same, then the gap is still as large. So one way to, you know, to help those of us that wanted something different is for us to actually pay some attention to that weight. Because I think all of our discussions said these students need more funds and in relation even to the whole. And otherwise, what's the point of going into the level of detail we did? So anyway, I would like to have a discussion on whether we would raise the weight of ELL and at risk, as if we're going to prioritize, because the council and the mayor, you know, often they'll say, okay, what, I know you want everything, but what's your top priority? So if this group's top priority is the whole foundation, then what is the weight within that that we would assign to these groups that we have identified as needing more?
And Kathy, there is a recommendation to increase the weight for EL. So that one is already there.
By how much?
To 0.61, which is what the adequacy study recommended. So there's an actual number
That's
for
in
that
there,
one.
but it's not in there for at risk.
There's not a recommendation to increase the at-risk weight. There's a recommendation to add a new at-risk weight for the students that have 2+ characteristics.
Well, I know there's a lot of advocacy groups that are going to start advocating for a raised weight for at-risk. It's definitely out there. So I think it's important that we, you know, we do the additional group, but that we make a concrete suggestion about what that weight would look like. Would be. Otherwise, I don't think it'll, you know, the council staff, other people won't do that work to say what is the weight.
That's more or less what I was trying to get at, but Kathy said it better.
What we based this on in our last meeting of our 8 meetings that we have held thus far. And it's a new weight, right? So this is an additional weight on top of that risk.
That applies to those with 2. And so then what is the new weight?
I'm asking you.
But won't we have to say what we are recommending it is?
I think the fact that we where we started from was, I can't remember how many options we originally started with. And we have now narrowed it down to this one. And you are right, we have not landed on what the specific weight would be. I don't feel comfortable that I have the information to know what it is. It would be an arbitrary, for me. Others might have an idea, but.
Could we just treat it as another category of at risk and have it be, I don't remember quite what it is, 0.225, like basically doubling the amount you get if you're at risk, if you have 2 more characteristics?
But then what the adequacy study says the at-risk weight should be 0.37. So really the at-risk, if we are saying that's our benchmark, wouldn't it be double that?
Yeah, I think whatever we're recommending, you know, for the at-risk weight, it makes sense to me to think about those with 2 or more characteristics, that they should receive double other at-risk students.
And I mean, I recognize to Jen's point that that's probably pretty arbitrary, but I feel like I just don't feel comfortable with us not saying what that weight should be, because that like the council doing that work, like I don't think it's probable. So
yeah.
You know, one thing, I'm sorry to jump in again, one thing that I want to flag, I don't have it on my fingertips, but I know the Afton study dug into this, is just a reminder that what was in the Afton study is a different definition than what we have now. And now we have a broader definition. And so there was hard work done of apples to apples to figure out where we fall. So I just want to be careful with the 0.37. That's not using the most recent definition of at risk, right? That one didn't include SNAP. So I'm just flagging it. If we're going to throw out a number and then somehow vote on it or make some decisions, we have to go pull that up, which I don't have it on my fingertips right now, but it wasn't an Afton study, so I'm sure it's someplace. Or maybe it's in one of the websites, actually. I'm going to find that.
So we've sort of jumped around a little bit. We still haven't gotten to the actual foundation level recommendation. But I think we should just address the point that has been raised. Lindsay, can you go to recommendation 1? Because we've been talking about this one. I just want to get it out of just make sure that we're clear. So what Kathy is proposing is that we include a specific weight into this recommendation. And what I've heard is that the weight should be 0.225, or we should say that it matches the current at-risk weight. So essentially what we would be recommending is that every at-risk student gets 0.225, and then any at-risk student who has 2 or more characteristics, that would be an additional 0.225. And is anybody opposed to including that number?
Brian.
Alonzo, yes. Sorry, you just muted yourself again.
The current rate is 0.2256. We should use the same number.
Okay, thanks for clarifying.
Thank you.
that, Alonzo.
Well, I think it's good for us to be specific, and you know, we don't have any guarantee that any of this will be accepted, but for us to acknowledge that we did this work and we acknowledge that these students have significant needs, especially right now, and that they should get that weight, which will be, you know, more. I think that's appropriate. I don't know what the cost is.
Yeah, what about, and Mary's put a note in the chat about, is it justified to double? What about if there's examples? I just feel uncomfortable at this point throwing out at this late date a weight that is not based on based on anything. So can we put some examples or example? Because I believe that there is some guidance needed. That's the point of this group.
So Mary,
what it is.
Mary Levy's notices that there's not really a basis for doubling it, but what is there? So we've made the conclusion that these students need more money. What would be the basis for the amount then, like in the work that's been done? If Jen is right, because there is examples of, you know, in the study, it had those students significantly behind. Are we basing it on the amount they're behind? Or Mary Levy, do you have any suggestions, since that's not a basis, of what would be the basis for us to put something concrete on this? Because people beyond us will not do that work.
Mary unmutes. And Lindsay, I'm going to ask you this because you know the Afton study at this point better than anybody else. I don't think Afton suggested what the weight would be. I think the idea is that they just, I think they modeled some options, but I'm going to stop there because I don't know the study as well.
And
well, is there any way that somebody could do that work and get back to us with, you know, the rest of the report could get written? And but I think it's really, if this isn't in here, then I'm afraid it'll get tossed.
Yeah, sorry, the way that I understood the Afton study was that they were doing 10% increases for each of the options to show the comparison, like a relative comparison between the different options, and they weren't making a specific recommendation on what the increase would be, what the increase should be for 2+ characteristics to close the gap. Like that level of study was not done. And I think, like, for example, when we're talking about increasing the EL weight to what the adequacy study recommended, that was based on like the actual work that was being done by the folks that did the adequacy study. And without having that level of research done, I don't know if the working group would be able to recommend a specific weight for that they think a 2+ characteristic student would need in order to close the gap. That's my sense. I think that I agree. I think it was Jen or someone said that we could put some examples in there or a range or something.
But we could have recommended an increase in the weight of overage students or something, but we didn't go that right. Is that right? The majority wanted the 2+ characteristics and not the overage. Because overage wouldn't have been a new characteristic. It would have then been the same thing, but we would have been able to,
No,
or it would have
Kathy,
been the same problem.
that it would have been the same problem.
I get it. I get it.
Yeah.
Well, I understand we spent a lot of time on it. I just feel afraid that without something specific, it won't happen.
Yeah, I understand your concern, Kathy. I think from just, again, I'm just trying to talk this out from my perspective as a member of this, having read all of the presentations and just all of the reports that we were provided, this all still seemed kind of muddy to me. And as other members talked about, you know, I think there was a sense that these had merit, but there was also some frustration, I recall, that these funds were really difficult to target at these populations effectively with interventions that were going to change the outcomes. And I just recall a lot of that conversation, which led me to the conclusion that unless there were some really effective and precise suggestions that we could make and support with evidence, this, you know, would just not result in, I think, what you and others and others of us would like to see. And that led me to my conclusion that there is something where we have some evidence that could support benefits for, you know, for all of those students, as well as, you know, the other students who are not in those categories. And that's why it just seemed to me to reorder the recommendations with 6 becoming 1, so that at least we're doing the best we can for everyone, and, you know, hoping to be able to build on that as more evidence and information is available to us.
I understand that I'm in a minority and we want to move on. I guess it's not very much money that we're giving that gets targeted. And that's one reason it hasn't been able to be more effective. And we looked at the concentrations because we can see that the kids in schools where there's high concentrations, it's much more challenging. So we went down all those roads and we didn't put something specific on this. And it's too late now to kind of come to that. But I feel in some way it has to be noted that helping all the students doesn't help these students enough. And that's why we tried to go down this road, and maybe we'll have to go down it again in 2 years. But it's complicated. And we didn't get to something more specific, but we put a place marker that this is important.
Mm-hmm. And so, Kathy, all of this conversation that's happening right now, we can include this as context in the report to say that some working group members wanted to put a specific weight to this, but there wasn't a consensus. So we can put in there that the discussion happened, even though there wasn't unanimous consent about like including a specific weight into the recommendation. So I'm going to stop discussion on recommendation number 2, because I do want to get to what we're calling right now recommendation number 6, which is the foundation level, because we really need to nail this one down. This is the one that needs the most work, and I want to make sure we get to that and have enough time to do it. So Lindsay, can you go to recommendation number 6? And also you have the Afton study still open on the screen. So can you close that too? I'm still seeing recommendation number 5.
Sorry, I think my computer is unhappy right now.
Okay, it looks like we're having technical difficulties.
Yeah, Lindsay, go ahead and turn off your video. That sometimes it helps you. I don't know if it will at this point. Sometimes, appendix is printed. Spiral of death.
And yeah, I don't know if you have the, if maybe because you're using the SharePoint version. Okay, there we go. Now we can see it. It's a little small, but I think we can make do with that while Lindsay works out the technical aspect. So what we had written for the foundation level recommendation was that the working group recommends increasing the foundation to match the recommended foundation of $11,628 in the adequacy study adjusted for a cost of living adjustment. So that was the only option that we had put up in the survey. And while a majority of folks preferred that option to other, there was a lot of comments that we got, as you can see in the pie chart. A little less than half of the people preferred a different option to the one that we had written. And there was generally two other options that had come up. One was that increase the foundation by 4% to track the average increase in personnel salaries and growth. And then the other one that we heard was increase the foundation by a minimum percentage every year tied to the increase in personnel and facilities. So sort of similar, one like puts the specific 4%, the other one puts a minimum percentage. So I just want to get the sense from the working group how we can change what we have written for recommendation number 6 to get more people on board and get a stronger majority for what this recommendation should be.
So I'm not sure if this is just a technical issue, but in the past, we've struggled with using or making a reference to cost of living because that, for some people, might mean CPI, and CPI is not what we want. So to me, I would love to remove the cost of living language because while I think it reflects the intent, people think of it from an actual number, and that's not, we don't want CPI. That is not what we're saying. So I think it is about coming up with a specific percentage, as it was stated in the options that were provided.
What's the percentage based on?
So the 4% was based on the Afton study. That was the Afton study showed that the costs for for the LEAs was increasing generally at 4% per year.
And that was a multi-year study. That wasn't just looking at a single year. So they're looking at both. They were looking both at charters and DCPS, and they were looking at it from a multi-year perspective. And that's the sort of average. It's actually 4 point something, but we're rounding it down to 4%. So it is tied to the study itself.
So there
I would
are
recommend oh, go ahead, Kathy.
No, I was gonna say there's a lot of people in that 45%, so I'd be interested in hearing to them. I mean, I know my thoughts, but I'd be curious, who are the other 45% think?
I would be in favor of tying to the 4% increase that is mentioned within the Afton study, just because that is the most recent quantitative work that's been done since the adequacy study, at least to my knowledge, that this group can point to.
Thanks, Justin.
Yes, I second that. I like the 4% from the Afton study.
Perhaps rather than guessing, maybe it'd be worthwhile polling people to see whether that would be a rationale people could agree on.
Was the Afton study done before the pandemic or during the pandemic?
This was all before the pandemic.
And it was just interesting that all the advocacy groups are going out for 3% and some acknowledgement of housing and transportation. And I understand this group has said we should ask for what we want, but I don't want it to be so far out anyway, I guess taking a vote is what you're going to do.
Yeah, I think also that I have some of this at my fingertips. I think from the Afton study, just as a reminder, because again, some are more than others on this, is that they looked at per pupil spending at DCPS and some sample charters and saw that the compound annual growth rate ranged between 4.6% and 3.4% per year in fiscal year 16 to 19. So I believe that's what Afton found. So there's a range, and to your point, Kathy, is obviously this was done much before our health crisis emerged. But that's what Afton found. So I think one suggestion I have is there could be a exact number. There again could be examples. There could be a range that this is from the Afton study, ranging from, whatever. So 4% is just not the, obviously simple, but it's not the only finding.
So I've heard from a couple people that wanted to specifically say 4%. Is there anybody else that wants to provide a response?
I'm going to throw out mine just to have another option. So the second option here, where it says increase foundation by a minimum percentage every year tied to the increase in personnel. I personally like personal salaries and growth. I think that facilities was also part of that study. And then after that, I would say that EG, you could say 4%. There could be some years where personal growths are higher than 4.
Well, this year's salaries are not going to go up, but anyway.
I'm sorry, what do you mean by they're not going to go up?
Aren't they frozen? I think at least for the public employees, they're frozen.
I don't think that applies to teachers, but somebody else could correct me because
It does apply to teachers for right now. That's my understanding. I mean, they're negotiating a contract, but it won't. Mayor is frozen public salary.
But these steps are still continuing.
The steps are still continuing? Okay.
And charters are still I mean, not all charters, but charters would still have the opportunity to do that.
So the proposal that's on the table now is to replace the recommendation to say increase the foundation by 4%. And I've heard from 4 people that want to do that instead of the 11,628 adjusted for cost of living adjustment. Am I capturing that correctly? Is there anybody that disagrees?
I guess I just have a question. So this recommendation for 4%, that's just for next coming year or every year from this point on? And the reason why I'm asking that is because, costs and whatnot are going to go it's going to wildly fluctuate. So I'm just.
We had talked about these, or I think we talked about this last time, that the idea is that these are recommendations until the next working group meeting. I think that was the idea, if I remember correctly. If someone please correct me.
That's what we did talk about last time. So we could put, I can't remember where exactly the language would end up, but we could make sure that it says that these are recommendations for the next 2 years. And that would apply to all of the recommendations.
Okay.
I did like Jen. I think Jen suggested a range, but I understand.
Come on, Kathy, back me up. I need somebody.
And maybe we won't resolve this here. I just think there's an opportunity to speak to more permanent structural changes that are needed. I know in the last working group, the UPSFF increases matching real costs, et cetera. And I know once upon a time, the DC code required the mayor to adjust the UPSFF at least for inflation, but that's repealed. So I think that's just something, I'm just saying it, and we do anything with it, but something to think about, specifically in the next few years are still going to be on this working.
And I apologize if I missed the initial scope of this group as being limited to a recommendation for the next 2 years. I agree with Kabila that we should say as a recommendation, here is good policy moving forward. And that would be each year tying an increase to some other functional increase. And if future groups want to change that, fine, but I don't think we are just making recommendations for the next 2 years. That also addresses Kathy's concern, or part of it, in that we're making recommendations in general for how the city should look at the funding formula, not specifically what should be done in the coming budget. I mean, it's included, but not specifically and limited to the current budget under COVID impacts.
Does anybody else want to add any comments or provide a vote? Or?
I was just going to say the one benefit of the 4% recommendation, at least for the next 2 years, and I understand that the rate can change in 2 years, and that we should, that the foundation level should continue to increase as costs are obviously going to continue to increase. The 4% is nice because it is evidence based on the cost that it takes to run a school. So to address Vanessa's concern about, if we don't necessarily, if we say something more broad, like tied to the increases in personnel, salary, and facilities, then the concern would be that they could take other factors that were not in the Afton study that led to that 4% increase. And I feel like since this was a multi-year study that got to that 4%, then for the next 2 years, the 4% should be pretty valid. I understand that there was obviously a pandemic that changed everything, but it's hard to say this year if there's a pandemic this much, and then this year if there's not a pandemic this much. So 4% based on recent history makes sense to me.
I just have two caveats. I think we have to have language that so we don't sound tone deaf, that this is a pandemic and that this is what's been put out as what's needed to do right by education, even though I have some disagreements, but that we also understand the importance of housing and transportation and the other things. I mean, I might not win on that, but I feel like it's important that we acknowledge the kind of world we're in and that we say, this is what's being put forward, with the understanding that there are a lot of pressures in other areas that will affect school children. So I think that's important.
Okay, so there's a couple more votes in the chat. It looks like we're building a consensus that the recommendation should be for 4%. So let me put a proposal on the table then. So the recommendation would read, the working group recommends increasing the foundation by 4% to track the average increase in personnel salaries and growth, and then add an additional sentence that says something to the effect of, like, the Afton study shows that costs for schools are increasing in a range of, I think, Jen, you said like 3.4% to 4.6%, and future increases to the UPSFF rate should reflect those cost drivers identified in the study. I'm seeing a few nodding heads on the 5 boxes that I can see. Anybody disagree? Okay, cool. So I Kathy.
That's all right. We're good. Let's go on.
Okay.
I just want to say that I agree with Kathy's first point about not wanting to appear tone deaf, and obviously putting this in context of, in an ideal world, this is what we recommend, but we know that we're competing for funding in an unusual environment.
Thanks, Jonathan. And Justin, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to get the group's thoughts on including some type of recommendation about an ongoing need for cost analysis. I think that that would be really beneficial, especially to the recommendation 2 to help us point to what amount is going to be effective for students with 2+ at-risk characteristics. Also just as this group continues to meet every 2 years, what is the right recommendation for the base foundation increase, if any? And if that can be supported by quantitative analysis, it's a much easier discussion for all of us to have every 2 years than kind of getting together and having these hard discussions about what the right amounts should be. I'm just interested if anyone else has thoughts on that, just because absent the Afton study, the adequacy study was a very long time ago. Things have changed drastically since that point in time.
I think the other concern with the Afton study is it really only had 4 charters in parts of it. So if it's going to be a cost analysis, it should be a more thorough and a comprehensive look at the cost.
And I agree with that completely. I think that all LEAs were invited to participate. So I'd be interested to hear more about how we could try to get everyone to participate going forward.
So I'm generally not in favor of adding a recommendation at the last minute, but I think that this is something that we could include in the final bucket that we have of like additional areas to explore. Would everybody be comfortable with putting in another bullet point in that section that the working group is in favor of exploring doing a every 2-year cost analysis?
Yeah.
Okay.
It just Mary Lee is chiming in on her agreement as well, Chair.
Got it, thanks. Okay, so I think we've figured out our foundation level recommendation. We can start to move through the rest of the recommendations just to make sure that everyone is on board. I think that this will go a little bit smoother, fingers crossed, because we did get a lot of consensus in the survey. So Lindsay, can we go back to the top of the recommendation list? And hopefully your computer doesn't go on the fritz again.
Can you see recommendation 2 now?
I can see 3. Okay, so just a reminder, we already went through recommendation 1, which was the 2+ characteristics. So now recommendation, again, we're going to reorder them, but for now I'm going to refer to it as recommendation 2. The working group recommends revising the name of the at-risk of academic failure designation to language that is more asset-based than deficit-based. And then we wrote a strong majority of the working group agreed on this recommendation. Some working group members requested person-first language in the revised designation. This one got almost near unanimous consent. So I think we're good with the language in this one. Does anybody disagree? Great, I do not hear anything, so I think we're done with recommendation 2, and we can move on to the next one, Lindsay. So recommendation 3, the working group recommends increasing the English language learner weight to match the recommended weight from the 2013 adequacy study, which was 0.61. This one 100%, so I don't think we need to have any discussion, but does anybody disagree with including this as written? I'm hearing no opposition, so settled. We can move on to the next one. Great. Okay, recommendation 4. So what we have here is the working group recommends a new additional supplemental English language learner weight for students who are designated as students with limited or interrupted formal education, aka SLIFE, or new to the country. And then there was not consensus on this one, so we provided additional context. So I'll just read this out loud. The working group considered several options presented in the 2020 UPSFF study to adjust the EL's weight structure in order to more efficiently target funding for EL students with the greatest need. Of these options, the majority of working group members favored adding a new weight to the UPSFF for SLIFE or new to country. Some working group members provided reasoning for their support, including ease of implementation and prioritizing more targeted funding for specific student groups with the greatest need. A smaller number of working group members favored replacing the original English learner weight with separate weights tiered by grade level. So that's a lot. So just looking at the pie chart, we saw that like the way that I looked at this is that if you combine the blue and the gold colors, both of those definitions, both of those recommendations include the SLIFE / new to country. And then it was just the gold that also included tiered by grade level. So what we tried to do was capture the idea that the majority of the folks in the working group wanted to get funding, additional funding for SLIFE and new to country. And then about half of the working group also wanted to add tiered funding based on grade level. Does anybody have any questions about that? It was a little confusing to me at first, but I just want to see if anybody disagrees with what we have written here.
So with our actual recommendation, it's a very small number of students that are SLIFE or new to the country. Am I right? So this recommendation does not have a big impact financially.
That is correct. I forget the actual number of SLIFE and new to country. I don't know if anybody else can remember that.
That's why I thought that a lot of the conversation about tiered by grade level was going to have much, for sure, the larger impact. But is the one before that says 0.61 or raises the weight, does it address some of the need that we saw in the grade levels? This is a small impact one, and we're passing over the other one. I'm just wondering, did we hit it in some other way?
To answer Kathy's question, it's 947 students that are new to country and 154 students that are categorized as SLIFE. But the caveat with those numbers is that there isn't a consistent definition citywide for SLIFE.
Can I ask another question on this one? I wrote a comment when I did the survey. I'm concerned that this might pick up like children of like foreign diplomats who are not disadvantaged in the ways that we are, I think, intending for students who've been like refugees. So I'm wondering how we could differentiate. I think the interrupted education, I think we probably all agree, is an area of need, but I think that it might inadvertently capture some very privileged families who might even be, English speakers by their native background.
Yeah. I will say, as just an aside, that at least the schools in Ward 4 are seeing almost no new to country this year, that it was a huge drop off. At least that's from these schools, whether that's the immigration policy, COVID, it's hard to say what it is, but this has probably become a smaller number.
I'm not sure that's true for EL Haynes, which we have both in wards 4 and 5. I think we still have, we've been working a lot on new to country.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there anybody that can answer Jessica's question if we need to change the language or anything to make sure that we're not including students who may not need the additional funding?
And I don't know if there's some kind of standard definition that I don't know how you measure that, but it's a potential concern, and it's probably such a small number of kids anyway. It's probably not a huge number, but I think just worth raising up because we do see some of those families.
I would add that this would be a bigger concern, I think, if we were just talking new to country, but they've already been tested and designated as English language learners. So there is a deficit to start with, whether they're more have additional benefits at home to address that is less of an issue than if we were just giving more money for students new to the country.
That's actually a great clarifier. Are we saying this is for only for those students already identified, or is this sort of separate? I guess that if it's already identified, then it probably does eliminate some of that challenge we just talked about.
Right, and and if I can chime in, most of the time our diplomatic students do not, I mean, they test English proficiency and they wouldn't be in this bucket of kids.
If we're counting them together in this recommendation, I guess I'm wondering if this is just a separate weight. Does that make sense? Maybe it's not. If it's just for us who are also this, then that's tougher.
I mean, the way it's written right now, it says a new additional supplemental English language learner weight.
Yeah,
and the way
okay.
you get, the way that you get
Great.
there is through the way Elba just described.
Okay, I think my concern is totally addressed then.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone, for helping with that. Is anybody, so sorry, just to go back to my original question, does anybody oppose how we have written this recommendation? Jonathan, I think you're on mute. No comments? Okay. Okay, so then if everyone is comfortable, then we're going to keep recommendation 4 as it is currently written. And we can move to the next one, Lindsay. Recommendation 5 is the working group recommends automatically increasing the alternative student weight to keep pace with the sum of the high school grade and at risk of academic failure weights should either have incremental increases. And this one saw near unanimous consent. So does anybody oppose including this recommendation or how this one is written? Okay. Oh, did I hear someone? No. Okay, so we can move on. So we've done recommendation 6 already. Great, thank you. So this is the areas for further exploration. And in the survey, we had included 2 areas for additional exploration. The first one was explore expanding the definition of at-risk to include students who are themselves or live with undocumented family members who do not historically apply to participate in federal subsidy programs, but would otherwise meet economic eligibility criteria for TANF or SNAP. Also explore expanding the definition to include parenting students and children of incarcerated parents. This one got about 85% approve and 15% did not approve of this one. So to me, that is a clear majority, so such that we would continue to include this one in the recommendation. Is there any discussion or does anybody oppose? No, and then the second one is explore expanding the currently operating DCPS Welcome Center to create a shared services EL center for all of the district's immigrant families with school-age children. And this one had a similar breakdown where there was a clear majority for including this one with just a few people that didn't want to. So I think.
But I do.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Sorry. We just started talking about this at the last meeting, and the reasoning was that there's lots of duplicate services between all the LEAs that we have. And so this was one that was pulled out. And I just actually would like to start this, that if we're going to examine the duplicated services that we think should be pulled out of the UPSFF, because that's actually what this is recommending, that it not go to any one LEA, that it be pulled out from a different bucket that serves all students. Now, that be a wider investigation, and that it not just go to this, because I didn't feel like I could get enough input on what the consequences of this would be. and what it actually meant. So it came up at the very end, and I think if it were couched in that we would explore the duplicate of services across both sectors and where the best location is, and then you could include this as an example, that would feel different to me.
But that's not what we're saying. I agree with that from a principal perspective, but that's not what we're saying. What we're saying is specific to the Welcome Center. And there's a rationale for it, right? There's this complexity that we've talked a lot about when it comes to how we service immigrants in DC and how complex it is from a data perspective, from a benefits perspective. And so this is intentionally targeting a particular service. The byproduct of it is that it would free up money to DCPS because it is currently coming out of the UPSFF. That's the consequence of that. But I don't want to lose or dilute the target of this, which is this is a concrete way in which the city can serve immigrant families, in which we are not able to identify other ways right now in which we can do that as a city, and that it is directly impacting the budgets of all LEAs. So I would caution to dilute the recommendation as part of a larger exercise of economics. This is intending to service and increase the services to immigrant families in the District of Columbia.
I would just, one potential consideration, I would also just caution against it becoming an unfunded mandate for DCPS to fund it for the entire city out of our operating budget, which I think that's not what you're saying, Vanessa, but I don't know that it's noted that way as written.
Well, I understand what you're saying, Vanessa. I guess, given that the cost drivers, I feel like it was not even in there that one of our cost drivers is that we have 66 LEAs and that we do have that. I understand this, but as we pull it out of, I don't know if this means we pull it out of McFarland and it gets funded outside of the UPSFF. It's a big thing to take something completely out of the UPSFF. It does free up money for DCPS, but also is all the city's money. So, I understand I'm in the minority on this, but I feel that it does require a longer discussion about what these duplicative services are and what other ones they are. And to each one, you could say students might get far better and far more, less complicated approach to it. So I assume is the early stages and Fresh Start, do they operate out of OSSI? So is this a recommendation?
So, Kathy, early stages is what I was thinking of in this example, where we are paying to operate it for the entire city. And so we do get some intra-district funding from OSSI, but it doesn't cover the total cost of the operations by any stretch. So I think that's what my concern was with this. Not that it's not a good concept, but just mostly how it would be implemented.
Well, that was the example so this isn't quite right yet. If we're going to pull things out, and DCPS is going to continue to run them, then I don't think that's what you intended, Vanessa. But it's kind of a sign of when it comes up at the end and we didn't get to actually do the work on it.
True, I acknowledge that. I think if I understand this correct, this part of the recommendation of the report, I just want to make sure my understanding is clear. This is just simply saying it needs to be further explored. This is not actually saying we should be taking the money out of one LEA or we should be mandating one LEA to do it. Like, this is really saying it should be further explored so that all of these points that are being raised right now should be discussed and analyzed and thought of carefully.
Well, maybe early stages needs to be in here too, if that's basically being.
It does.
Yes. So maybe that's the way it gets worded, because early stages was the example. And maybe we haven't quite done it. So maybe it's expanding. Maybe that gets added.
This is Mary Levy. It has been a principle of the formula ever since the beginning that citywide services provided by DCPS are not included in the per pupil. It's how we once did it with non-public placement tuition. It's how we did it with special ed transportation. And Kathy's right, early stages, it's the same thing. When I do analyses I count that as a state cost, and it should be funded by the state. It doesn't belong in the UPSFF. It belongs in a separate funding stream, both of them. Now, that doesn't mean we recommend doing that, but we recommend exploring the funding of citywide services, including those two. And it should come out of some other agency. And if they want to contract with DCPS to do it because DCPS has been and has experience, that's fine. But it doesn't belong in the UPSFF.
Well, so then can we add it says to explore it, but we obviously somehow didn't do it right with early stages. So it has to be explore. It's not explore expanding that welcome center. It's explore state functions moving out of the UPSFF that include the DC Welcome Center and early stages and things that have been defined as a state function. I mean, I don't exactly have the language right, but it's not actually expanding DCPS's center. What's being proposed is to set it up differently.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. I think we can change the way that that's worded to address that.
Yeah, and if I may add, I don't know that this may alleviate what you're saying, Kathy, but the way that the recommendation was written in the cross-sector recommendations that were made is the exploring the creation of a citywide centralized English learner support center to align resources in an effective, cost-effective manner, providing services to all of the district's immigrant families with school-age children. So I think it replaces the expanding to creating, which might be at what you're trying to get at. But I think the premise of having something written in here is to acknowledge that that we have a compromise with this population to offer certain services, and we are not doing that equitable across LEAs. And it was almost like we acknowledge that we're not doing this, so we want to explore how do we take something that has been working and use it to expand it so that we have equitable services and we're avoiding duplication of services, right? So that we can concentrate more in the instruction of language learners and not in the logistics of, or the operations part of that. If that helps in any way.
Thanks, Elba, that does help. So we'll reword how this is written. I'm going to move on to number 3. So number 3 is something that has come up routinely in the meetings, and we forgot to include it in the survey, which is why it's highlighted at the bottom here. But this has to do with exploring funding intervention to prevent students from becoming overage prior to high school. So we didn't vote on this one because it obviously wasn't in the survey, but again, it had come up a number of times. So we thought that we should include it as an area of further exploration. And I just want to get the working group's approval on that.
Ryan, my initial thought on this is that students are overaged. They can be overaged at any point. What they can't be until high school is undercredited. And so I think that there are potentially 2 different ways of looking at this recommendation. One is to look at overage students before they reach high school to prevent them from being overaged and undercredited in high school. Or the other is to look at what is to prevent students from becoming both overaged and undercredited in high school. So to frame it differently, I think the first way would be to look at students who are already overaged. And then the second one will be to take a longer look and look at students who could be overaged and undercredited, but are not necessarily yet overaged. Mm-hmm. From my experience in working with this population, both in middle and high school, I think it would be most straightforward to recommend that we explore funding interventions to support students who are overaged before high school. That would not take an analysis to figure out what characteristics they have. We already know which students are at least a year behind where they should be in school. But I think recommendation would take some work to figure out how to prevent students who are not already overaged from becoming overaged and undercredited.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense to me. So we would change the way that this one reads to specifically looking at the students that are already overaged for whatever grade level they are in before the high school grades.
That would be my recommendation.
Okay. Does anybody else have any comments?
This may seem like, I don't know, silly or extra, but I would just make clear that if we're saying like doing this through the UPSFF, because I can, see a world in which some readers are reading this and like, we do have out of school time providers. We have like a lot of different methods through which we could do this work. So I would just be clear that we're talking about potentially doing this through the funding formula.
Okay. Great, thank you. And then we are going to add in a number 4 here about the cost analysis that we had, that Justin had brought up. So I'm just reading through some chats. I think this is the last slide, right, Lindsay?
Yeah, this is the last one.
Okay, so we have gone through all of the recommendations and all of the areas for further exploration.
Can we flag
We
one
do need
line?
to.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Jen.
I'm sorry, I apologize. Kabila and I both had something on one. Sorry to backtrack and answer question.
Oh, sorry. I'm seeing that now.
No, it's okay. I'm going to say my piece, and Kabila, I'll let you say yours. For me, I felt like we've spent a lot of time focused on those students who, trying to focus on those who are undocumented, who aren't participating in the subsidy programs. And then we also have this second, which is addressed in the first sentence. And then the second sentence talks about also explore expanding the definition for parenting students and children of incarcerated parents, which I know was discussed as well as some other topics. My suggested revision to the second sentence is also explore something, I don't know what the right language is, but also explore other, I don't have the right positive language, students with challenges such as parenting students and children of incarcerated parents. I don't think these two are the only ones we have talked about. So I just want to modify that if we're talking about other groups. I don't know if others agree with that or not, but that is a suggestion. Chelsea just put in the chat that she agrees with me. I'll shout it out because it makes me feel better.
Yeah, I think another group that I mentioned in the survey was children who are receive home visits, but aren't necessarily in a foster care home. That's another example I would see exploring here.
Another thing I said, I don't know that I have any recommendations, but as it pertains to, figuring out how we can target funding to students who are undocumented or living in homes that, their parents or caregivers are undocumented. I guess for me, it seems like this is something that I get confused on, like when we say qualify, but the way we're determining qualified eligibility is whether or not people apply. It seems like that is the issue, so, and that's not a legislative fix, I don't think. So I don't know. It's just something to put out there because I feel like until we figure out a better way of capturing those students, I don't know that changing anything in the legal code will actually get us there, but that's just my thoughts.
Camilla, this has been a topic that you're right has come up a lot since that risk was introduced. I think in fiscal year 15 or something. I think it's fiscal year And I think that there's a reality of the data challenge that unless we collect, household income from all students, then we don't know unless they're participating in particular programs. So to me, it has been a logistics challenge. And so I don't know what the solution is.
Do you think it could be solved by a legislative fix?
So you're saying it should be tied to specific program participation?
No, I'm not. It seems like, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like what we're saying is like change something within the definition of at risk, like the code, to try to capture these students. But it seems like to me the way that in which we track data is the problem. So how would that be solved by a legislative change is what I'm asking.
I know one recommendation that isn't perfect, and I think that's part of why we chose not to say it, is we have lots of students who, for an income level, qualify for free or reduced meals, but aren't eligible for SNAP or TANF based on documentation status. Not all schools collect individual family free and reduced meals applications. So saying that if you qualify for free or reduced meals based on an individual application wouldn't capture students at schools that have community approved free and reduced meal status. But that's a potential vehicle to get at income-based eligibility that isn't included in SNAP and TANF right now. The intricacies of legislating that are still to be resolved, but it's not about whether people apply. It's even applying, some wouldn't be eligible for SNAP or TANF based on documentation status.
So I like that, Jonathan, actually, for those who aren't really eligible schools, right? So I think that is a minority of schools at this point. So that would help solve for those schools. It doesn't necessarily help solve for those that are community eligible. Is that right? Or are you suggesting that those schools try to collect the forms from those families?
I'm saying that's an option. It may not be an attractive option or a practical option, but, and I'm not saying it's an option that we should propose. I'm saying that if we propose some exploring a change that might capture some of that could include further study on what might be required or whether a partial inclusion would be acceptable for a period of time or not.
I definitely am supportive of exploring some other options because I think that could be one opportunity. I feel like I keep hearing that WIC is another opportunity that we haven't really explored. So I think there are options, and we have definitely spent a lot of time, rightly so, focused on this challenge.
Okay, thanks everyone. I do want to make sure that the public has an opportunity to comment. So we have a couple people that are attending as public members. So if you would like to provide comment, you can use the raise your hand feature, and then I can unmute you, and then you can provide your comment. So I'll give you a minute to do that if you'd like. And just a reminder, if you want to raise your hand, it's in the participants section of the WebEx platform. You can click the button. And I'm not seeing anything right now, but again, if you raise your hand before the meeting is over, I can make sure that your comment is included. So then I'll open it back up to the rest of the panelists. So we've gone through everything, all of the recommendations and all the areas for further exploration. So we are going to make some tweaks to these recommendations, move them around in order, add some additional language where it's necessary. And then we will send this the list of the recommendations back out to the working group. This is the last meeting, so if you have any final comments or anything, you can email myself, Kevin, and Lindsay if you have any additional comments that you want to make. Is there any last things before we close out? Any last questions or anything? Okay, cool. I'm not hearing anything. So let's see, to wrap up, I just want to thank you all on behalf of OSSI and the DME for putting in the significant time commitment that's required to be a member of this working group. There's been a lot of reading and homework and discussions and everything. So we definitely appreciate all that you have done to get us to this recommendation list. The report we will be submitting to the council in January. And I think that's it. If there's nothing else, then I think we can close out. So thanks again, everyone, for agreeing to participate on the working group. It really does mean a lot to get all of your feedback. And it does help us to write this report. So I'll give you all about 15 minutes of your time back. So thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ryan.